The Stage Door Show, celebrating the independent artist. With your host, Dave Hondel.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Stage Door Show. Tonight, my guest is a talented filmmaker who has executive produced popular and highly rated TV series and has created what I believe to be a masterpiece of a short film that I think will get rave reviews when it hits the film festival circuit. This is a piece that he wrote, produced, directed, and edited called Cycle. Can't wait to talk about this film with him, so let's bring him in now. Please welcome Cubie King to the show. Thanks for being with me, Cubie.
Thanks, Dave. Quite an introduction.
Well, glad to have you with us. And, I know you gave me the film to screen and just phenomenal film. And I know we talked about this before we recorded, but I was very impressed by not only the storyline, the acting, but also the way it was shot. Everything about it was just phenomenal. And, so I want to kind of get into, first of all, how did this film start? When did you start writing it? And then talk about the progression of, the actual shooting of it and talk about your crew a little bit.
Sure. First of all, I just want to say it's an honor to sit down with you, and the work you do is just phenomenal. So, it's a real honor to sit down and talk to you. So we'd have to rewind back to 2013. I wrote a treatment for this film. I had just left CNN, and it was a fertile period of creativity where I was just coming up with a lot of ideas. And I had just bought a new road bike, and I wrote a short treatment called Cycle about a graphic designer who has a wife who's pregnant and who is just under pressure. And it took place during the Obama administration. I've worked in news my entire life, and the backdrop of the government shutdown was a part of it. And so fast forward to it was good. It went into the vault, and I went on to write more things. And in 2017, my girlfriend at the time, when I created that original story, was now my wife. She was pregnant, and I pulled that story back out and shaped it into the short film that you saw. And at the time, we were pregnant with our first child, Leia, who I love dearly. And it was during the Trump administration. I was a better writer. I was a better creator. And I don't know. It's just another one of those periods where it just shaped up and turned into something that I thought I wanted to create. So, that's the general idea. I'm happy to elaborate more on the story, but that's sort of the inception of it all.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that sometimes when you see something on screen, it's years in the making. I mean, it doesn't always happen, right? Because I think a lot of people think people write things and they just spew it out, and it doesn't happen that way a lot of times. I mean, Absolutely. It's not only just with films, with music, with everything creative. Sometimes you have to put it away, let it sit for a while and take a break from it, do other things. Absolutely. And then when you feel inspired again to bring that piece back to the forefront, I think you're more energized and ready to go to the next level with it. And sometimes if you spend too much time on one thing for too long, it almost becomes like work in a way. I mean, right. So I think that's a great process. And, when you actually brought it back to the, to the forefront again and started working on it, did you feel that to be re-energized, to bring it back up again? And did you feel like you were a little more ready to move forward with it than you did previously, I guess?
Absolutely. So I was 33. I was a young man, and at 37, I was a grown adult. No, yeah, absolutely. I was a better writer. I was I think my talent had sharpened. My wife was a great influence. And I think just living in that particular time period, and I just channeled, you've seen the film, and the protagonist is stressed. Let's say that. Yeah. And so I wasn't as stressed as my protagonist, but I channeled that. And so I think that I was able to put something together that at that age I wasn't ready for. But what's great is that, the bones were there, and so I was able to use the circumstances of my life at that time and fill it in and create something that I was excited to create. And to your point, that was 2017. I still showed it around. I have a tight circle of friends. And by 2020, I thought I was ready to go. And we know what happened in 2020.
Yeah, right.
So that got put aside. And so at the end of the day, I ended up doing my video and getting it off the ground. When I say my pitch video, 2022, when we were coming out of COVID. And the pitch video is, it was very important to the creation of that film. And then, to my surprise, the fundraising was just gangbusters. And so, being strategic and just overwhelmed by the amount of support that we received, I pushed it another year to 2013. September is when we shot. And then, of course, I edited it. And so we're just finishing up a couple of weeks ago. So to your point about just how long it takes, you don't know going into it. And when I was, back in 2013, I didn't know I was going to make it. I didn't know how long it was going to take. You put it aside and you just keep working. And that's one of my mantras is you continue to create. You don't know what you're putting down on the page, but you have to believe in the ideas that come into your head. And if you have those ideas, rush to the page, write it down, put it in your drawer. You never know. Those ideas will stay with you. And so I would encourage any artist who's creating that you just never know what inspiration will bring. And nothing's dead. It's all alive. We're always growing. And if you're committed to growing, if you're committed to the craft, those ideas can continue to grow.
No, that's well said, Cubie. And one of the things that when you were talking and when I was watching the film, it kind of reminded me as you were talking about it. But the stress, the pressure that this actor showed in the film, or this gentleman that was playing this character, I think, because I lived in the New York City area and lived in New York City for a while as well. But I don't think, when we talk about pressure, people generally, obviously we all feel pressure, we all feel stress, but there's a special kind of stress that you feel when you live in the city, when you live in New York City, when everything is elevated, rent is elevated, groceries are elevated, getting to work is elevated. Everything is just a struggle. And I think people that don't live in a big, huge urban environment like that, you don't realize the kind of stress that somebody, and I could empathize with this gentleman. You need your job. You need to work. You need to support that kid. And so everything that he was going through, I just literally it brought back memories of me living in New York. So it was very well done. So speaking of that, how did you find the actors? How did you cast this? Because the actors that you had in this story really nailed it. I mean, nailed living in New York.
Thank you.
Nailed living, kind of presenting that pressure on screen that it really it was true to life, really. So how did you find them?
Sure. So it was I like to say that the film is 23 minutes and I probably went against everything that short films should be. The advice, keep it contained, keep it small. So I think we have 11 or 12 speaking parts. So there's a lot there. Focusing on our lead actor, Lee Kaplan, who's incredible. I found him through one of my producers, Molly Pearson, who knew him and worked with him. He had put on a one-man show called Bully, and we auditioned widely. So I probably had about 30 auditions for that lead role. Most of it was self-tape. Actually, for that particular role, it was all self-tape. And when you write something, it's open to to everyone, all races, all, I wanted to see everyone. But when you write something, you kind of have a feeling what you're hinting at is that, this film is, it's largely about anxiety, about a man who has a baby on the way, who's got his job on the line, and he's, living in a stressful time. And so when I saw Lee's audition, when he walked on that screen, there was something that I saw in him, in his, not only his physical appearance, but in his eyes, that really just told me, wow, that's the character. And when you audition sometimes, and hats off to everyone who auditioned. I mean, I just had some very talented individuals who auditioned, but people can read the text and you hear it, you see it, but Lee had a take. He had a perspective. You could tell that he had read it multiple times, that he was coming in with his version of the film. Now, it took several months for me to commit to that. I watched his audition, I can't tell you how many times. And I believe at the beginning of 2023, I called him up and said, hey, Lee, let's have a conversation. And I cast him. Now, moving down, his wife is someone that I knew in a directing class. I've never seen her acting, but I thought that she's fantastic. She's an actress. And I said, hey, can you please audition? And I think that worked. The boss character, Victor. Now, Victor is a extremely talented actor. He's worked with Steven Spielberg. He's in Boardwalk Empire. Molly again suggested that I try him out. I saw his audition. I didn't tell him immediately, but he nailed that role. And then when we get down to some of the other roles, they were just either people I knew. So for instance, the librarian, Lillian Sikoria, an amazing comedic actress that I've known for quite some time. The rude biker who's arguing, it's someone that I work with and who's a budding comedian, Ellis Fury. And just piece by piece, we put it together. The film itself, as you've seen, has a lot of different tones. So I had a different feel. Natalie Kim, who's absolutely extraordinary, absolutely just a funny, witty person who auditioned for the wife character. And I said, you know what, I have to work with her. And she was in. So, every step of the way, it was very meticulous. I had a particular point of view for every character. And it was great. It was great to see it come together, but it's not easy.
Right.
And you've got to stick to your guns, and you need to do the work. You need to do the work and actually understand what you want from these individuals, and these very talented actors. And I'm in awe of actors. I'm in awe of what they do. I'm in awe of just the passion that they brought to the film. So, I mean, every time I watch it, I can tear up. Yeah. Watching what they brought to it.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because when you said you tear up when you watch it, I used to do the same when I'd watch my fully edited music video or saw it on BET, and kind of a spiritual moment. And I think that a lot of people that are creative, when you work so hard, unbelievable, and then it's almost like that's a creative endeavor, like a film or music or a song or anything that's creative. You put so much energy into it, and but it doesn't happen alone, obviously. No, so you have a crew. So talk about your crew. Talk about the people that help, because any indie film, there's not like, you're not walking onto the Warner Brothers backlot where there's sound trucks and catering trucks and this and that and star trailers, and I mean, you might have some of that on an indie film, but for the most part, people that are doing this, I mean, it's down and dirty filmmaking. And so talk about your process during making this film, and then talk about your crew and how they were able to kind of help work together and finish this with you.
So as you know, I've worn a lot of hats in my journey, and I think that's important for every director to understand these key roles. So I think the first place I would start is with my cinematographer, because behind every great director is a cinematographer. I met Dylan Isbell when we worked at Time Inc. together, and I did a lot of work at Time Magazine with him. And he was also I show ran a show for CNN and the Weather Channel, and he was my series DP. So we've had, I'd say maybe about 8 years of working together. And what I love about Dylan is he has an impeccable eye. I'm also a photographer, as I know you are as well. And there's a sensibility with what he does that we don't have to say much. He knows what I want. And for this particular project, composition was key. And so we locked in very early. My costume designer, which is huge, David Hart, he's an incredible incredible fashion designer with an impeccable eye. And David and I were friends. My wife was a showrunner on an Amazon show, and I met him. And, very early on, I was just collecting talented people.
Yeah.
And I go, hey, David, I got something. So we're going to do this. And so along the way, he's like, hey, what's up with Cycle? What's up with Cycle? And so we would have extensive conversations about what we want to do. My art director, Gabby Lowe, who I met closer to the start of the production, she worked on another fantastic film. She was great. And then the meat and potatoes, Jesse Torrance was one of my producers who came in. I lost a great producer who just, production. It's just things happen. And a producer that I had on for the entirety of the time got very lucky and very fortunate that she was wanted to adopt. And 6 weeks out from shooting, I think she's like, hey, we got a kid. And so Jesse Torrance popped in, and all of a sudden I had this, incredibly kick-ass producer who locked in. But one of the most important collaborators is my wife. She was a Peabody Award-winning producer. She's there for like every step. She hears every crazy idea I have. Yeah. And so, my wife is here for every second of it. And so, she is my rock, and she's, literally the most important person besides myself at the top of this. But I mean, you go down to just APs, whether it's Vicky, you go down to my friend Phil Mark, who helped with the storyboards, my friend Jake, who I went to school with. I mean, it just goes on and on that we had so many talented people working on this. But it's a collection, and similar to casting, you've got to pick the right team, the people that see the vision, people that are down for the ride, and that are locked in, because, I expect a lot. And I say that pretty frankly, like, hey, we're going to try to make one of the best things anyone's seen. And if you're not ready for that ride, then, maybe you're not ready for that ride. But I take it very, very professionally, because that's what I do for a living. So, when I pivoted to this side, it was go time. So my team was fantastic.
Well, and you're talking about some of the stuff that you did prior to making this. That's Amazing, which is a TV series that on the Weather Channel. You're executive producer, showrunner on that one for 8 episodes. The Next List on CNN, you produced that series, and also Weird Waters. You're co-executive producer on 10 episodes on that TV series, and so you have quite a resume, behind you. So I guess at what point did you decide that this is something that I want to do is make films? I had this experience being in production. But what kind of made you wanted to kind of, do something creative like this endeavor that you did with Cycle? And is this something that you want to continue to do down the road?
Absolutely, it's something I want to do. I want to be, my entire life goal is to be a director. I want to make prestige projects. But the quick and down and dirty story is that, I realized around 17 years old that I wanted to be a filmmaker. I just had a lifelong love of cinema, and I didn't quite know that. until I was sitting down with college brochures, and all of a sudden I'm ticking through. I thought maybe I'd be an architect. I love to draw. And I saw a film school, and it just, I always say it's, like the critic in Ratatouille when he eats the ratatouille, and it just all comes into vision. And I realized that my entire life, I've always loved film. I just always have. Whether it's me and my brother, watching Star Wars, I can, you and I could probably go on and on about the 80s and the 90s and how fantastic of a time it was to fall in love with film. And so the second I understood that and got into the University of Arizona early, I just committed to learning as much as I can and reading and studying the masters. I'm a massive film buff. And so, long story short, I've been in production for 25 years. I think in dog years, I'm about 100 years old in terms of production years. Right. And that's why I was able to kind of pull off what I was able to pull off. And, it's borderline a sickness, because everything that filters through my mind is focused on filmmaking, on directors, on just cinematography, and what's a good story, and adaptations, and writing, and craft. It's really something that's important to me. So it's a lifestyle, and I can't disconnect from it. It's just something that's been a part of me from such an early age. And quickly, I would say, my grandmother, when I was very young, put a camera in my hand when our family would get together. Everyone would come out, they'd show up to San Diego, and, all the hugs and whatever else. And I'd walk over to her, and she'd be like, my nickname is Dave, coincidentally. And, she would go, Dave, go in the trunk and get the camera and shoot this. And so, I was a family, videographer. Right. And so, just from an early age, it was always something that fascinated me. And so, Cycle is a culmination of that, and hopefully much more to come.
Yeah. And when you're talking about your film buff, and, you sound like a student of film too. And when Absolutely. I was growing up, I went to, not only did I have TV production class, went to school with Steve Zahn, the actor Steve Zahn. I was
nice.
We were the first ones to open up our TV production class. So I was always, that's what got me excited about being in production. But we also had film study school, or film study as well. That was one of my electives that I took. And I really fell in love with film. Like we watched Bridge Over the River Kwai. We watched Citizen Kane, and The Third Man. All these things that were utilizing like shadows, because it was black and white. They're using shadows, right. and how Psycho, they were using Hershey syrup for the blood. And so I just really fell in love with the making of these films. But my wife and I, we watch Turner Classic Movies almost all the time. Like it's almost on our TV all the time. So we watch these movies from the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s, and and a lot of these films were just a single shot tripod, where you might see this, the same actors in the same frame for 10 minutes sometimes, and the camera doesn't move. But it's all about the story. It's all about, if you have a good story, that's really what it's all about. It doesn't have to be the movement of the camera. It doesn't have to cut every 5 seconds. And it's really about the story, because these people were making films. This is really the heyday of Hollywood. So talk about the story, and how important that is, because I know that it's sometimes that supersedes the actual, sexiness, I guess, of the camera work, right?
Yeah. And man, I mean, you nail it. I think I went a long time working in the industry and wanting to make my own films, but it's, when you get past a certain age, you understand what it takes to make something. And, I wanted to make something significant. And so when I wrote Cycle, like I said, it really came together because I had the bones. It came together in a couple of days. And just over time, I have, like I said, my small circle, but, you continue to work with people and talk to them. And I would say probably about 50 people read Cycle, and they're like, you got to make this. You got to make this. And you would get little takes, a really great friend of mine, my friend Chris, was like, he's like, man, this is really intense. And, you take those adjectives and you take those small little kernels and you go, okay, great. But I think you're absolutely right. And you have to separate your writer brain from your director brain. And so I sat on that for a while, and I usually don't write things unless I can visualize them. I'm a highly visual person, so the script is very sparse and it's put together. And I actually had to write a couple of sides to audition the actors, which were folded into the film. But story is king. I mean, you don't have anything until you have something. And I say to people all the time, we all want to make shorts, we all want to be creative, but if you're going to invest at a high level, I hope that cycle exists on, get your script into as many hands as you can. One of the benefits of working professionally for as long as I have is that, and especially as an editor, you understand that feedback process. And what you're really listening to is what people, that emotional response that people are giving you. And you can start to pick it up just from those initial conversations from your script. And so I generated a lot of positive energy and got actors excited and producers on board, and many of the collaborators that I work with, because of the script. And I think that's something people have to keep in mind. If you have something that radiates a level of craftsmanship and passion, and people want to see it. For instance, Jessie, who came on, she's like, oh my God, I've read tons of scripts. And she's like, I love this. I love this. And that's what you want, right? You want people to come in, and that energy, like, I can't stress enough how much energy you need to produce something at a high level. And it as the director, as the creator, you have to exude that. Right. But you also have to be completely open and vulnerable to critique. And so along the way, every person has a take. Right. But every once in a while, someone says something, there's a little kernel. Hey, after this little thing, maybe there's a little beat here you can add. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Hey, over here, this is really confusing. And then there's a collective, there's some notes that you go, okay, yeah, maybe I should shift a little bit here. Sure. But story is king. You don't have anything until you have that. And then from there, you put on the director hat and you say, all right, let's visualize this, and let's take it to the next level. Well, I know, the film has been sent out to some film festivals, and so excited to find out what happens. So, obviously we want you back on the show to talk about that and anything else that you work on down the road. But before we go, a couple questions that I always like to ask. What kind of advice can you give somebody? Because you've been in the business for a long time, so you understand production, you understand what it takes to be a director, producer. So what kind of advice can you give somebody that's just maybe out of college and that's looking to enter the field, which I'm sure has evolved quite greatly since you started? Right. So what kind of advice can you give somebody? Here's what I would say. I think we all have to remember that just on a broad level, cinema is a medium, and it's existed for about 100 years plus. And I would encourage anyone who wants to be a part of this medium to study the medium. I take that very seriously. I worked in video stores coming up, and I love film deeply. And so I hear a lot of conversations about, the cameras you're using and getting out there and just doing and all of that. And I completely encourage people to do that. But I would also encourage people to get in, start conversations with the masters. You don't have to love the masters. Like you said, you watch The Third Man, you watch Citizen Kane, you watch The Bridge over River Kwai. And I would encourage young filmmakers to go back and watch those films. They don't have to resonate with you at first. It may even be turned off, but you want to get in conversation with these masters, because when you're 5 years older, you're going to see more. 10 years older, you're going to see more. And classics are classics for a reason. And so that's something I would encourage. The other thing I would say for younger filmmakers, and I think it's a great question. And, this is probably going against the trends here, but I would suggest that anyone, I've been showing my daughter who's 6 years old, we've been watching Lego Masters, right? And it's a great show. It's creative, and she's watching these very creative people work with Legos and build these creative little projects. But there's a lesson to be learned. And what I would say is this, because my entire career has been, in a lot of ways, trial by fire, getting out there and doing it. And what I would say is, if you're creative, if you can find a job that forces you to be creative, but on a deadline, forces you to be creative and that you're getting notes all the time, forces you to be creative where it strips you of your ego and forces you to do just a ton of work. And I guarantee if you do that for 2, 3, 4 years, while you're still studying and putting things together with your friends or whatever else, you will be so much stronger and wiser. And I think that that's something that if you're building independently, there's an aspect of the industry that you might be missing. And I know a lot of friends that they may struggle with taking notes. They may struggle with the structure. They may struggle with building teams. And, I've worked in places where it's high pressure. It's do or die, but you start to understand it's not about me. You start to understand that this has to get done. Yeah. Hey, this project just got killed. Hey, this project is moving over here. Hey, this needs to be done by 9 o'clock. Hey, we need to cut 2 minutes out of this immediately. And when you get that into your blood, then when you step aside and you're making something independently, look at that. You're strong.
You're ahead of the game. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know there's so many conversations about there's a lot of conversations about the insecurity and I think we all have these fears, but I would say attack your fears.
Yeah.
Go after the things you're insecure about. If you're insecure about editing, go deep. We've never had more resources until now.
Well,
and so
unless
YouTube
you're uncomfortable, you're not going to grow. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
In everything you do.
Absolutely.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
So well said, Cubie. And also, when it's all said and done, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to leave behind when people think of Cubie King?
Oh man, that's I'll stick to the basics. I'm very fortunate to have some amazing parents. So, my goal is to pass on just the love and the support that my parents gave to me, to my daughter, so at the end of the day, if you said good husband, good father, good son, that's a win. Absolutely. And then, if I get a little greedy, hey, maybe he made one of those films you'll remember down the road that's on AMC or TMC later on. So, that's the goal, but, I'll keep it classy and just say, just be good. With what you do. That's
an important thing. Definitely. Well, Cubie, I can't, thank you enough for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And we're so excited about Cycle and can't wait for it to come out to the masses so our listeners can also see it. And again, let's have you back once it wins all the awards at these film festivals.
It's going to be awesome. I don't know. We'll see. But thank you so much. The kind words, but I really want to come back and we'll talk about what it does. And if someone is interested, maybe I can slide them a link if they're interested. But thank you so much. And I really appreciate you watching the film. I mean, in this day and age, someone watching a film is so huge. So I really appreciate you.
I really do. I think it was a phenomenal film. And, like I said, the storyline, acting, the shooting, the directing, everything about it was amazing. And I know you wrote, directed, produced it, edited it, but I know you have a phenomenal team as well, and I want to shout them out again, like you talked about during the interview, and they just did a great job as well. So
best team ever.
Yeah, exactly. Just really great job by everyone involved, and like I said, can't wait till this gets out there, and can't wait to have you back. And again, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Dave. Real honor to be here. Thank you.